It was a very special day on the island of Sodor. "We're here to launch the new rail line through the mountains," announced the Vat Controller. "And we are also launching the centerpiece of the new line, the Sodor Suspension Bridge." Everyone cheered. They had heard so much about the mountains, and the people of Sodor couldn't wait to see it. They had also heard of the suspension bridge as well. It towers so high that the tops touch the sky, and the valley beneath was so deep that he could barely see the ground. Thomas was excited about the new line, so was Gordon, but Percy looked nervous. "I don't want to go to the mountains. It's very windy up there." "Don't be such a scaredy engine, Percy. You shouldn't be afraid of a little wind," said Thomas cheekily. But Percy was afraid. Just then the Fat Controller came towards his engines. "Thomas, Gordon, Percy, you'll be the first engines to cross the new route today." Henry and James were relieved. They didn't want to cross the suspension bridge either. "There's nothing to be afraid of," Thomas boasted. "You both are a couple of scaredy engines." The three engines got their coaches and their passengers hopped on board. Gordon puffed off first with his passengers. Then Percy, and last but not least, Thomas followed suit. Annie and Clarabelle were also excited about the new route too. Off we go, they chimed. Along the way to the mountains, everyone clapped and cheered at the passing engines. But when they reached the mountain route, Percy slowed to a crawl. "These mountains are much too high," he groaned. I can't go on. "Don't be silly, Percy," replied Thomas. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But Percy stopped. He was still nervous about crossing the mountains. Thomas then puffed gently behind Percy's coaches and gave them a push. The tracks grew steeper as they puffed across the mountains. Meanwhile, Gordon was thundering along the line, and the two engines were having trouble catching up to him. "Go on, you two," he called. "Keep up." "Wait for us," shouted Percy, but Gordon climbed higher and higher until he was out of sight. "I don't think I can make it," Percy groaned. "This mountain is too steep." "Don't be silly." Finally, the two engines arrived at the top, and there it was. The suspension bridge. It was very long and very windy. The bridge swayed from side to side. I won't go," Percy declared. "Come on, Percy," puffed Thomas crossly, who was by now getting rather annoyed with Percy's attitude. "The passengers want to see the mountains on the other side." He then looked across the bridge to see if Gordon was near, but he wasn't. He had already crossed the bridge. "I'll go first, then you'll see that it's not so scary." Then slowly but cautiously, the little tank engine puffed bravely across the bridge. "If the wind blows, close your eyes," called Percy. "That way you won't see anything scary." Thomas looked down towards the valley below. Suddenly, a strong gust blew and it shook the bridge. This scared Thomas, and his driver applied the brakes. Thomas closed his eyes tight, and then he came to a sudden stop. He opened his eyes, and he gasped. "Oh no!" The shake and the sudden braking knocked him off the track, and he was resting near the edge of the bridge. "Are you alright?" called Percy. "I'm stuck," wailed Thomas. Just then, Gordon arrived. He too was shocked from what he had seen. "Driver, call for Harold." Gordon's driver raced towards the signal box to call for help. Thomas kept his eyes closed. His coaches and passengers were concerned too. Finally, Thomas heard the sound of some whirling rotors. It was Harold! Thomas was relieved. Harold hovered low and said, "Hitch the rope to your buffer and hold on." And in no time at all, Thomas was placed safely back onto the rails. Everyone cheered. Thomas backed up where Percy was waiting. "Not so scared, are you, Thomas?" he teased. Thomas felt embarrassed. "I'm sorry for my teasing, boasting and impatience, Percy," he said. "I was silly to have so much confidence." "Well," Percy added, "you at least tried to be brave, so let's cross the bridge together." And sure enough, the two engines crossed the suspension bridge. Everyone was happy and the view looked wonderful. But Thomas and Percy were the happiest of all.